Welcome back to the show. I'm Natalie Brunell, and joining me this week is best-selling author and financial journalist Michael Lewis. You may have read some of his very popular books. Many of them have been turned into movies, including The Big Short, Moneyball, Blindside, Liar's Poker, and he recently released Going Infinite, which is about the rise and fall of Sam Bankman-Fried and the crypto exchange that is no more, FTX. Michael, thank you so much for joining me and taking the time. I know you've been very, very busy, and you even had a chance to visit the trial of the century, it seems. How are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, I spent a month on the road flogging my book, and then I ended in that courtroom in Southern Manhattan. I was there. I got off just in time to see. All I really saw of it was Sam Bankman-Fried testifying. So I was there for 3 or 4 days for that.
Well, I can't wait to hear about that. But first, I just want to learn a little bit more about you because so many people that watch this have read your books, watched the movies based on them. Can you share a little bit about your career path and how you built this amazing, successful career as such a prolific author? And I know that originally you wanted to be an art historian, right? And you studied archaeology, then you studied economics. So how did you get to be where you are?
It was accidental. I wasn't. I think there are a lot of writers who think of themselves as writers when they're little kids, and I was never that way. If you'd asked me what I was going to be when I was 9 years old, I would have said a professional baseball player. It would have been, and I had no indication that I had any kind of literary ability or even ambition until I got to my senior year in college. So no English teacher ever said you can write. No, no, I never wrote for a school paper, any of that. My senior year in college, I had to write a thesis to get out of college, and it was effectively a book. Uh, and I got so engrossed in that process, in like taking a subject and spending a year mastering it and reducing it to 60,000 words, that I thought I want to keep doing that. And I thought that meant I wanted to be an art historian because that was the subject I was dealing with. My advisor said there's not going to be any jobs in art history, so that's not what you want to be. And I finally kind of figured out what I really want to do is write. I just like that. It was and so I went from never having published anything anywhere to being out of college and trying to get magazine things kind of in print without success for several years until finally stuff started to take. And around the time the stuff started to take and I started to get actually bylines in magazines, I got hired on Wall Street. I didn't have any money. It was a way to make a living, but it was also in the back of my mind, the material was going to be great. And what really launched my career was the book about that experience of working on Wall Street. It was called Liar's Poker, and it came out, I don't know, 3 years after I started my job at Salomon Brothers, and it did well enough that I haven't really had to worry about making a living as a writer ever since. So it was accidental. It's felt like the thing I should be doing ever since I started doing it. I've had mostly nothing but encouragement since I started doing it, but I can't completely explain it. It's not in my blood. It's not in my family. It's not in my personal history. It's just kind of like it became the thing I wanted to do, and I did it.
It's an inspiring story, especially what you
Is it?
shared
I'm
with
not
me.
sure it's inspiring. It's a
Well,
weird story.
there's so many people out there that want to be published authors, and so few make it to the top where they have book after book that's a hit. And I remember you mentioned to me on another call that you were writing under a pseudonym and you were publishing essentially the truth about the industry, and the people you were working with had no idea that it was you, right?
Well, so this is where I got a sense. This is where I sort of the first time I ever really market tested my writing. Once I got to Wall Street and I was working at Salomon Brothers, I started to write about Wall Street. And I got myself in all kinds of trouble in the very beginning because I didn't have really a sense. It was a different age. Like, you kind of knew that you weren't supposed to talk to journalists, but no one really ever said anything about being one. And I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal arguing that investment bankers were overpaid. And at the bottom, it said Michael Lewis is an associate with Salomon Brothers in London. And it created a shitstorm inside the firm. Like, what on earth? And for complicated reasons, they weren't going to fire me. But I had to sit down with the bosses, and they said, you can't do this. And I said, I'm going to keep doing this. And they said, could you just do it, keep our name out of it and do it under a pseudonym? So they let
Wow.
me, I mean, you can't imagine a bank doing that today, right? So God bless them. They let me keep doing it. And I would write about stuff that was basically going on right around me. And when the pieces would come out, I'd come into work and I'd see it, across the trading floor. The thing had been photocopied and people were reading it. And I could see that there was like a hunger, even in the people on the inside, to read about what was going on. And that emboldened me to quit and go and try to write a book. If I hadn't had that kind of feedback from readers, I don't know if I'd have done that.
Well, I've always heard the advice, write what you know. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, your experience was Wall Street and seeing how the sausage is made. You obviously saw a lot of the corruption that goes on behind the scenes. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why crypto exists, right? It's a response to this system that isn't working for everybody anymore. A lot of people feel left behind. Some of them are extreme and want to burn the whole thing down. Others just want maybe a bridge to another system that is more inclusive for everyone. So is that maybe what attracted you to Sam Bankman-Fried when you finally met him and heard about this crypto exchange that you ended up profiling?
Oddly, no. I had entreaties from people in crypto going back to like 2011. Please come write a book. This is a really important. It's a subject that deserves more attention. And I'd interviewed people in crypto, in and around crypto. I'd made several sort of stabs at finding a way to get interested in it at book length. And it's hard. I can't just take a subject. I need a subject and a character. If I'm going to write 300 pages, I have to have someone who the reader is going to follow. And I never found anyone substantively. I mean, crypto was always curious. It was always an interesting social phenomenon because it was this reaction to the financial system. And it was a legitimate reaction to the financial system. Coming out of the financial crisis, it made a lot of sense to want to burn it all down. And then what happened in the financial system, the fact that it kind of even got in some ways even more rigged after the financial crisis, totally understandable that there's a sort of outsider outraged movement. That doesn't mean I should write a book about it. What attracted me to Sam Bankman-Fried was, I met him. A friend asked me to meet with him. I didn't know who he was. This is a fall of 2021. I'd never heard of FTX. So that's how little attention I'd been paying to crypto at that point. What interested me about him was what he wanted to do with crypto. That first he wasn't a religionist. So he was like, this could all go away tomorrow, or it could be a movement that matters. He says, I don't know. You're asking me to judge the faith in the thing, and it's very hard to judge a faith in the thing. And he himself was not a religionist. He was like, truth is, using crypto for his own purposes. But this is just at first meeting. It wasn't, so it subsequently became really interesting to me. But at first meeting, I was really interested in that crypto was building things like exchanges that possibly could run better than existing financial exchanges. It bothered me a lot, and I wrote a whole book about it, Flash Boys, that the exchanges in the United States had changed their business model. They essentially got into the business of selling customer information to other customers and giving preferential access to big fast players to data, so that there was a inequity on the exchange that the exchange was in effect promoting because they were profiting off of it. And that the crypto exchanges, all their problems, and of course they had problems, the way they were structured, that the inequity actually wasn't even possible because you were trading not in servers but in the cloud, or it'd been much harder to generate. They felt like more of a level playing field, and that interested me a lot in the beginning. It also interested me just how quickly in crypto wealth had been created. It was insane. I mean, by the fall of 2021, I don't remember the exact numbers, but you have the market cap of all crypto is something like $2 trillion. So we went from zero to $2 trillion in 12 years. And that wealth was in someone's pockets. And a lot of it was in Sam Bankman-Fried's. And I just thought the social effects of this are as interesting to me as the financial effects. Like the way this disrupts the society when you have instant, not just billionaires, but people who are instantly worth 10, 20, 30 billion dollars. It's just different. So the combination led me to have this kind of desire to just watch what was happening. So I started to pay attention because of that.
It's time for a quick break to hear these messages from my partners who make this podcast possible. First up, Bitcoin 2024. The world's biggest Bitcoin conference is coming to Nashville next year. Come join us for 3 full days of keynotes, panels, networking events, workshops, concerts, and more. My first ever Bitcoin conference was back in 2021, and that's where I dropped my first episodes of Coin Stories. Not expecting this to become my full-time job. Anything can happen here, especially if you dream of working in the industry. Ticket prices go up every month until the big event, so don't miss out. You want to get your tickets early. Head to b.tc/conference and use the code HODL, HODL, for 10% off. I'll see you in Nashville. Next up, CrowdHealth. Health insurance costs are sky high today, and you send your money every month to a massive corporation, and you never see that money again, even if you don't get sick. Luckily, there's another option, and it's all about community. CrowdHealth brings together Bitcoiners who crowdfund each other's healthcare, so you no longer have to pay fiat health insurance companies. You get to help other Bitcoiners, and they help you in return. So how it works is when someone needs a doctor or hospital visit, CrowdHealth negotiates down the medical bill lower than what insurance would be, and the community helps you fund the costs. You get to save the money you would have sent to insurance, and hey, why not put it into Bitcoin? I'm so glad I made the switch to be part of this community, and now I spend only about $100 a month on healthcare. For more information and to join, head to joincrowdhealth.com/Natalie. Yeah, I remember the articles that said that Sam Bankman-Fried might be the world's first trillionaire, and back then there was so much attention poured onto him, and I was really, I don't know how shocked I was, I guess, with everything going on in our financial system and how broken it is. The fact that you wrote about how VC firms were throwing money at him without getting a board seat, without having a CFO or any of the things that you would think due diligence would find within a company. But one thing I really want to ask you about Sam Bankman-Fried, because after reading your book, this was the thing that most confused me about him just as a human being.
Yep.
You talked about how he had a very difficult time connecting with other human beings. One of the quotes was, not being super close to that many particular people made it more natural to care not about anyone in particular, but about everyone. So he couldn't connect with, love, feel empathy for you as an individual, whether you're a friend or a lover, but he cared about this collective good, all the individuals in the world. And I don't understand, how do you reconcile? How can it be both?
I don't think it's that complicated. I think that when he collided with this effective altruist movement, but even before that, the way he tried to turn all of life's problems into math problems, and once you turn like how you're gonna behave towards other people, or what you're gonna do in the decisions you make about other people, once you strip it of emotions, you could turn it into a math problem. It's like, I'm going to maximize the good I do and minimize the bad. Or when he hits the effective altruist movement, I'm going to maximize the number of lives I save. So you don't even have to think about how you feel about things. So he cared. And when you say cared, he cared about it intellectually. I don't think he actually felt a great love for humanity. So it isn't really a contradiction. It's not like, oh, he didn't love individual people, but he did love humanity. It was that he had maybe a detached respect for the human mind and the human future. And so that human beings were to him the superior creature. And he could see the value in humanity. But I don't think he didn't love mankind. Now I don't think that was the motive in him. But it leads you strange places. I mean, it leads this movement, the effective altruist movement, strange places. Once it becomes detached from the ordinary sympathy, the ordinary human feeling that guides most people's behavior, and it becomes a math problem. How do we lead our lives so that our every move maximizes the number of human beings who will exist? It leads you different weird places.
Do you get the sense that he had an ego, or that he felt a sense of guilt for the people that he hurt?
Well, those are two different questions.
Mm-hmm.
Start with the ego. He's massive. Massive grandiosity. And I think it was a byproduct of the isolation in which he spent his childhood. I think that his view of himself was never seriously challenged. He could have a romanticized view of himself because he didn't have he didn't have friends to tease him. He didn't have friends to bring him down to earth, and his parents didn't do it. His parents were, as a friend said of them, both kind of frightened for and of him. He didn't seem to fit into the world. So the grandiosity and the egotism, it was big. It was what attracted people to him. I mean, one of the reasons the venture capitalists are attracted to him is he seems like the kind of guy who might be the world's first trillionaire. So the egotism actually, and the grandiose ambitions benefited him on the way up. Did he feel for the people he hurt? That was the second part of the question.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say I've detected that. One of his, when FTX imploded last November, there was this comic situation where every other employee had basically fled the island in about 6 minutes in the Bahamas, leaving behind a couple of stragglers, one of whom was the chief operating officer of the company, a woman named Constance Wang. And she was bewildered. Like, she was supposed to be the CEO, and she realizes she had no idea how this place ran. She was furious, and she went looking to sort of investigate Sam. She had access to documents. She was looking for like material the prosecutors could use. She wanted to string him up. She was not in a happy mood. And she had the opportunity to grill him. I mean, they were both still there. And one of the things, she was looking for evidence that he knew what he had done, or that just how premeditated it all had been. But she was also looking for, like, how much does he care? And she came away feeling like he actually has no ability to feel. Like, I can't get him to even fake a kind of compassion. And she was thinking about the pain he'd caused her, like lost all her life savings and lost her job and her reputation, all that. She didn't even get directly from him the sense that she felt sorry for her. So the only thing I'd say in his defense is I don't think he'd ever pretend that he had any of those feelings. I think if you had him on the show and said, "Do you feel badly?" he might actually say, "I don't feel anything."
Well, yeah. I mean, you wrote in the book, he said, "I don't feel pleasure. I don't feel happiness. My reward system never clicked. My highest highs, my proudest moments come and pass. I feel nothing but the aching hole in my brain where happiness should be." I mean, he doesn't sound normal. And it begs the question, like, is this nurture? Is this nature? I mean, is something wrong with him? Did you feel that way too?
Yes, here's how I felt. I felt like I was watching someone who was just born wired differently. And his parents picked that up very young, that he was born without some equipment that most people have. And that he had substituted for that equipment this kind of calculation. Everybody who dealt with him felt like they could see him calculating. They were sometimes even charmed by it, but they could see he was making a calculation when he was talking to you about whether it was worth talking to you. And the calculation was always present as a substitute for the other thing. And a part of me pitied him or sympathized with him because I don't think he could do anything about it. But it's also true that, there are conditions that are diagnosable. And he was never diagnosed. He was never treated as a kid as having any kind of intellectual abnormality.
Even by the psychiatrist that is in your book.
Oh, well, then he's no longer a kid. He meets the psychiatrist when he's 26, and the psychiatrist actually said, "We gave up talking about feelings because he doesn't have any." And the psychiatrist was quite open about the fact that Sam came to him, and when he laid down in the beanbag chair and started to talk, it wasn't about his problems; it was about business decisions. Mm-hmm. It was using the psychiatrist as a sounding board. The psychiatrist was very aware that Sam was just different, and there was no point in fighting it. and he made no effort to try to change him.
Well, I know that you've gotten some criticism in other interviews or on Twitter saying that you've been too sympathetic to Sam Bankman-Fried. And on your 60 Minutes interview, I think that you said that he didn't intentionally defraud customers, but the jury, they only took one day to convict him on all charges, including fraud. So I'm just kind of curious, have your thoughts evolved since that interview and since witnessing some of the trial? Like, what's your take now?
So I see it more of his story, more of a cause for sadness than anger. Still, I think that, look, so my takeaway from the trial is that it didn't answer a couple of big questions I had, but the prosecutors seemed to be arguing that up until about June of last year, it's very clear that what they did, it's very clear from the book, they broke the law. They broke the law just by not having a distinction between Alameda research funds and FTX funds right when they start. They treated it all as one big pile. It's basically Sam's world.
Yeah.
Where it starts to become darker is when the pile of money in Sam's world is less than the sum that is owed customers. When the day that if all the customers turned up and asked for their money back, they couldn't get it back. The prosecutors seem to be suggesting that was about June of last year. So it's a period of 4 months when they're living with that situation. And what I meant when I said he didn't intend to do, but I think the question is like, did he intend to like steal the customer's money? No, that would have been dumb. He had this thriving exchange that the whole thing was so stupid. The reason no one saw it, the reason no one, at any given point, someone could have said the money's in the wrong place. No one said that because no one imagined he'd be so stupid as to do that, because he had this thriving business that he was putting at risk to make a lot of speculative gambles that, might or might not work out. What he intended was that no one would ever know when people would get their money back. That's what he would have intended. What he did was wrong. That's clear. He was essentially using customer deposits as an interest-free loan to make lots of speculative plays. That's different. It's wrong in a slightly different way than he just stole the money. I didn't have any. There's never not a whole lot of question in my mind that he was going to be proven guilty. It was just like, it was pretty open and shut that way. I didn't want to say it because I wanted the reader to just be able to feel what they felt about this without me intruding. But his colleagues say it. His own colleagues in the book say, like, he's trying to pretend it's an accounting error. It's clearly not just an accounting error. There were a couple of things. Have my own thinking evolved? It hasn't changed that much. There are a couple of things that came out of the trial that they fit it. The person I write about in the book is perfectly capable of doing all the things that happen that you get described in the trial. But one of them in particular was so stupid, I couldn't even understand why he did it. And it didn't get a lot of attention because it actually didn't have a lot of material effect, but it was very telling. At the end of 2021, they have $950 million in revenues. He turns to Nishad Singh and says, find $50 million more revenues. I don't know if you followed this. He said, I think you can sort of like invent revenues by claiming we have staking interests with these serum tokens. Mm. So they effectively invented $50 million in revenues, and he didn't deny it on the stand to make it $1 billion. He wasn't raising money at the time, so he'd already raised his money. He'd already made his pitch to the venture capitalists. The money was already coming in, so there was no reason to do this. It's clearly illegal. It's pointless. So there was a kind of degree of recklessness. I knew he was reckless. Mm-hmm. It was the degree of recklessness that surprised me a little bit. But just going back to, I didn't start writing this book till January, so I kind of knew most of what had happened when I started to write. But when it all blew up, and I sort of hear about kind of roughly how it all blew up, it made a lot of sense even then, because he'd done the same thing or a similar thing way back in 2018 when he'd started Alameda Research, his crypto hedge fund. That you can see the seeds of this catastrophe in that event. And in a normal market, like not crypto, more regulated, more eyes, less incestuous, so not just EA people, what happened in 2018 would have put him out of business. That he wouldn't have still been able to function as a financial person. And so he would have been shut down one way or another back then. And the wonder is that he wasn't. The wonder is he was able to do it all over again in a bigger scale.
Well, I remember the early Alameda Research deck being shared on Twitter, showing that they basically guaranteed investment returns and how they were greater than Bitcoin and the other tokens. And it was just a lot of the things that you read after the fact. It seemed so obvious. But like we both said, so many people were willing to invest. And I want to come back to that because the stories that you have in this book, from the celebrities to the VC firms and the politicians, were just jaw-dropping at times. But you explain very clearly in the book about FTT, the token that was essentially the SBF coin. And you state very clearly how it is a security and it was equity in the company. And it would have been illegal to issue this in the United States, which is, I think, one of the reasons why he operated offshore. But what is your understanding after all this time and all of the experience you have with the FTX team about crypto and the unregistered securities that exist in the space? And do you see a difference between that and Bitcoin?
I mean, it's funny. I make distinctions between FTT and Bitcoin, but I don't see other people making distinctions. The way it's kind of was described at the trial and the way people talk about it, they talk about it like it's Sam's Bitcoin. Like it's just another cryptocurrency, but he invented it and controlled it. And Bitcoin, it's different. It's really different. It's different because it has a revenue stream attached to it. A third of the revenues from FTX, and there were substantial revenues, were used to buy and burn FTT. It's like a stock buyback.
Yep.
So you have a stake in the company. And even now, that FTX is, seems to be dead and gone, but FTT is trading at almost $4. I mean, it was issued at 10 cents. So think about this. If you had bought into FTX via FTT back in 2019, you'd still be up 40 times. How is that? I mean, there are reasons for this. I think the reasons are that there are people who think it's going to be rebooted and that there's actually enough in Sam's Dragon's Lair left over to pay off everybody. And that's possible. It's not wrong. But it shows you that this is more than just hot air created by Sam Bankman-Fried. Bitcoin, the value of Bitcoin is different. That Bitcoin has no revenue stream attached to it. You're not getting dividends from Bitcoin when you own a Bitcoin. I guess you could get interest from Bitcoin by lending Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is the value of Bitcoin is a byproduct of the faith in Bitcoin, and the faith in Bitcoin is spectacular. You and I met at the Bitcoin conference in Miami. It would have been a kind of a low in the history of crypto in terms of mood and esprit de corps and morale. It was still incredible. I mean, that people, where does faith come from? It's hard to say, but but that's what that runs on. It's different. I could see that. And I could also see making an argument. I mean, the argument's been swallowed that by the regulators that Bitcoin is not defined as a security in the United States, right? Mm-hmm. Bitcoin futures would be a security, but Bitcoin spot is not. So they're different. They're distinctions that need to be made. I thought the conversation around FTT was so bizarre after it all fell apart, because before it all fell apart, even venture capitalists, I think Multicoin was one of the venture capitalists, preferred to own FTT to owning stock in FTX. So they viewed it, and actually you could see why. If you own stock in FTX, what do you own? You own a piece of the profits. Mm-hmm. If you own FTT, you get the revenues. Which would you rather have? I might rather have the revenues. I can see how they thought that way, but it was in general, crypto people preferred FTT and VCs preferred the stock, but there was at least an argument there. So for it to all of a sudden be treated as, oh, this kind of fraudulent thing that didn't have anything underneath it, I think it was just to misconstrue it. It wasn't, and it isn't. It's still got some value, and it is incredible. Let me ask you a question. Would you buy it at $3.50?
No. I would not buy any of these tokens issued by the exchanges.
You wouldn't buy BNB either, right? But
no.
But look at this. The founder and CEO of Binance looks like he's going to jail. He's just pled guilty to crimes, and his token is trading at like $220.
I know.
It's incredible.
I know. I was actually going to ask you, because CZ is a character also in this book, and there was a lot of back and forth between him and Sam Bankman-Fried. He had a huge stake in FTX. Obviously, those tweets when that balance sheet was leaked and he was going to sell FTT token. What do you think about the Binance settlement and where things are moving in the crypto space now?
My head is spinning because the first thought that actually crossed my mind, it's a weird thought, but the first thought that crossed my mind is, I wonder if CZ is sitting there regretting having brought down FTX. Imagine a different world where back in November of last year, the Alameda balance sheet is leaked, but it actually isn't that much news. Forbes had the same balance sheet a year earlier. It wasn't really a balance sheet. It was just a list of stuff. It's when CZ goes on Twitter and says, there's something wrong with this place. I'm going to sell all my FTT. He starts to trigger a run on FTX. If CZ had instead said, even though he hated Sam, I know that we have intimate dealings with FTX. I own $1 billion or whatever it is, $500 million of FTT. And I'm not only going to keep it, I might buy a little more just because I think that the skepticism about that place is overdone, even though Sam and I have had our differences. I wonder if CZ's playing that tape in his head, because in that case, it's not hard to imagine that FTX is still up and running and thriving, and no one's come after CZ yet. I could be wrong about that. Could be that they're to come after CZ no matter what, because the charges are different and the concerns were different. But I do wonder if CZ thinks that he dug his own grave by torpedoing FTX. Now, see the CZ turning himself in Seattle surprised me a bit, because he's been avoiding coming to the United States. He's in Dubai where there's no extradition treaty. I thought he had dug in his heels and just decided he was going to be essentially a stateless actor, and he's just going to ignore whatever hostility came out of the United States. And I guess he must have felt, I'm just guessing, he must have felt that spending his life as a fugitive on the run from the United States government, and his exchange constantly under that kind of threat was worse than 18 months in jail or whatever he gets, and getting to keep most of his fortune.
Well, that's exactly it. I think he's one of the owners of these offshore exchanges that's being systematically brought into compliance so that U.S. regulators have more of a vantage point over what's happening in the market and a little bit more control, especially because they want to prevent market manipulation if they're going to approve one of these spot Bitcoin ETFs. But I think all of this was a house of cards that was going to fall.
It's probably going to fall at some point. I agree. The question is when it fell and how it fell. What if Binance, what if it fell this way? Because it didn't have to go the way it went. What if FTX doesn't fall first? What if FTX is still regarded? Nobody knows that the money's in Alameda. Everybody thinks it's the sound good player. It's not questioned yet. Maybe that would happen one day. But instead, the first thing that happens is CZ is brought to heel by the U.S. government, and they go after Binance. What could very well have happened in that case, and I think that was a bet that Sam Bankman-Fried was making. A lot of the flows that Binance saw would have moved to FTX. That FTX would have boomed overnight. It would have grown at Binance's expense. So the sequence of things made some difference.
Hmm.
But I gotta say, I was just surprised that CZ made the decision he made. And especially since it doesn't seem like he has a control exactly right now over what's going to happen to him. I mean, he may think he has some sort of arrangement, but people are saying he should. I mean, why 18 months? I mean, if he's pled guilty to these crimes, there's a lot of discretion over what kind of jail sentence he might receive. What if it's 10 years? I don't know.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The U.S. government, but the U.S. government is motivated by different things. I mean, what motivated them in they move with speed on FTX for different reasons than they moved against Binance. FTX isn't. I mean, money laundering was on the list of charges, but FTX wasn't like helping North Korea and Iran and the Russians against the Ukrainians. That FTX was oddly pretty careful, I think, about the know your customer stuff because they thought that's how they were going to be inspected by U.S. regulators when in order to get their license. It was that stuff that was why Sam Bankman-Fried bought CZ out, is that because CZ wouldn't do the know your customer stuff, it was causing trouble for FTX trying to get licenses other places. So they were both problem children, but they were problem children for different reasons, I think.
Well, I think that's really interesting because it was crazy for FTX to offer 100x leverage and prop up a bunch of their company with this FTT as if it's real collateral,
Yeah.
unlike something like Bitcoin or dollars. But it makes me think about the political aspect because in one part of the book, I remember that you said Sam thought there wasn't enough money in politics. And he was trying to engage in that process, trying to make it so that there would be favorable regulation. That's one of the reasons maybe that he was treated pretty well in DC until everything blew up. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because, at the top of the show, we were discussing the system. The system,
Yep.
I think for so many people watching this, they can agree, maybe that's why they love Bitcoin. It's broken. There's a lot
Yeah.
of corruption. There's a lot of wheeling and dealing. And it feels like the average person isn't represented anymore the way that they want to be, and they don't feel like the people in office really have integrity and have their best interest in mind. And so I'm curious about is what you saw with Sam Bankman-Fried meeting with people in DC like Mitch McConnell and talking about potentially paying billions of dollars so that Trump won't win. Is this another sign that our system's broken? Like, what does this say about our system?
Yes, it is another sign the system's broken. It's a sign that. So it was a funny line that came out of his mouth when he said he's surprised how little money there is in politics, given the rules, right? The rules have changed in the last decade or so. The rules have changed, maybe a bit more than a decade. But there's now effectively no limits in how much a rich person can give to a political candidate. You just have to be kind of clever or crafty about how you do it. But you can buy politicians, individuals. Yeah. And what is it means? It means it takes. I mean, it undermines the democracy. It's horrible for the democracy. Our votes are not all the same. That if you have $10 billion and you're willing to spend it on politics, you're more important than everybody else. And Sam saw this, and he marveled that even though the rules were what they are, that billionaires weren't spending even more money to get their way, because if you got your way, it was so valuable. His own political activity. I mean, this is actually also on the list of things that interest me right away about him. It was what money could do in the world because the world was so screwed up. Mm-hmm. You could accumulate it at an incredible rate because of changes in technology. And then you could deploy it in really brutally effective ways because of changes in laws and changes in the society. And, he was busily doing about three things at once. One thing was he was spending an awful lot of money trying to get his pandemic prevention people either into Congress or inside of Congress, promoted inside of Congress. He was spending a whole bunch of money trying to stop Donald Trump, trying to stop Trumpism, like people who were going to overturn the election from getting elected. And that's the stuff he was doing with Mitch McConnell. And also apparently talking to Trump about paying him not to run for president. There was a moment when that seemed like Well, it was implausible on the face of it because Trump would just take the money and run anyway. But it's but
He was
there was
trying to bribe
Donald Trump $5 billion to not run for president. He was trying to figure out whether that was legal. It was funny. He was talking to lawyers about whether it was legal, and
we crossed that line, right? It's like it's lobbying, but it's really bribing.
It's really bribing. Well, so it's like at the center of Sam Bankman-Fried that rules don't matter, right? Mm-hmm. That you're just trying to figure out if rules are there to be gamed. He replaces principles with probabilities. He's not concerned. The rules are, it's like he's only worried about getting caught doing something bad, not whether the spirit of the rules don't mean anything to him. So he was doing that. And then he was doing whatever he was doing with crypto regulation, but the actual sums of money involved in the crypto regulation side of things was less. However, he was talking about spending so much money. I mean, he talked about spending $1 billion in this presidential election cycle. It took about a nanosecond before everybody in Washington wants to meet with him. Right. And it's even if he's a saint, even if he's the best human being who ever walked the earth, there's just something weird and offensive about people being able to walk in and control the political process that way just because they have money. Yep. So yes, it was completely revealing the kind of the problems at the heart of the society.
It's time for another quick break to hear these messages from my partners. Next up, OneGold. Are you a gold bug? I know that Bitcoin and gold are sometimes seen as rivals, but retail investors and even billionaires consider them both to be vital hedges against inflation and economic instability. OneGold offers instant access to insured and audited precious metals in your choice of secure global vaults. Backed by trusted industry leaders, OneGold enables 24/7 trading with unique features like auto invest and the bullion card. Plus, you can purchase metals with BitPay. Start now through the link in my show notes or download the OneGold mobile app today. I'm excited to share that I'm an advisor for the Orange Pill app. If you haven't downloaded this app yet, you're missing out on connecting with Bitcoiners in your area. The Orange Pill app is focused on building the social layer for Bitcoin and helping create opportunities for in-person connections and community building. You create a profile and you'll see lots of familiar faces, and then you can search for Bitcoiners and Bitcoin events based on your location. I'm geotagged in my home base, St. Louis, and I'm excited that Orange Pill app has allowed me to meet new people in my city. Come join us, use my referral code in the show notes, and start connecting today. Next up, I want to take a moment to recommend an outstanding recent book in the Bitcoin space, Bitcoin Evangelism by Brian DeMint. I've had the chance to have Brian on the show, and this is really the ultimate tool for orange pilling your friends, your family, your coworkers, and it will make you a more effective messenger for Bitcoin. We all have that story of how we disregarded Bitcoin the first time we heard about it because either the arguments weren't compelling enough or maybe they weren't framed in a way that we could easily grasp them. Think of something like trustlessness or immutability. These are concepts that now we understand as Bitcoiners, but how do you explain them simply to someone totally new in the space? Well, Bitcoin Evangelism will help you do that. It will allow you to become a Bitcoin evangelist so that we orange pill millions of new Bitcoiners in the new year. Head to the link in my show notes to buy the book today. Well, and you kind of said in the book that he had to make crypto secondary. It was more, he had to find a way to get in the room that was kosher to the politicians. And crypto, they weren't really excited about, but something like pandemic prevention or preventing election fraud was something that might get him in the door a little bit more. Plus, they heard how wealthy he was and he was willing to throw money around.
He was doing things. He had more than one motive. He was completely sincere about the pandemic prevention. I mean, you don't put $10 million into Carrick Flynn to try to win the Oregon House race, Carrick Flynn has got no other interest but beside pandemic prevention and so little political aptitude that even $10 million doesn't buy him the race. He doesn't like to, he's nervous about public speaking and he gets angry when people criticize him. You can't understand the weirdness of the story if you want to believe that that effective altruism and all their goals was just phony. That's where he lived. That was his group. That's where his sense of identity came from. He wanted to be you could argue that there was a kind of darkness to it because what he really wanted to be was the single most important person in effective altruism. He wanted to be the giant of that world. But those are the people he lived with. Those are the people he admired. Those are the people who he had fights with. It disturbed him deeply and ruined his life. The gurus of effective altruism had been in his life since he was in college. It was just like, that was serious with him. It just was also convenient that once he's there, he can also talk about crypto. And he was making some headway with crypto regulation, but that was a much heavier lift. I mean, the extent he had problems as a manipulator of the political scene, it was his association with crypto. I mean, that's a whole interesting subplot. It's like where there was any kind of friction because people were nervous about crypto.
Exactly.
Like he tried to name the New Orleans Saints and the Kansas City Chiefs Stadium, the FTX arenas, but both franchises turned him down because of the crypto association.
Wow.
There was a bit of that, but you gotta you'd if you had spent the time with him and the people around him that I spent, I don't think you'd think he was anything but sincere about his interest in pandemic prevention.
Okay, well, but back to the powerful people.
Why is it so hard for you to see that he's both that and capable of moving money out of FTX into Alameda Research? These things are not inconsistent.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that he was so full of delusion in general, which is interesting because there was almost a whole chapter about the delusions he saw in the world, right? The fact that other people believed in Santa Claus or God. And he thought basically it was okay, I think, in some ways to create a delusion, because if people are so convinced by a story, that's really their own fault. Did you get that sense? I mean, for me, it was like he created his own delusion, and even though he made fun of people for believing delusions.
I don't think the effective altruism was part of it. I think that where he does do this though. He did this very self-consciously with the venture capitalists. Mm-hmm. It was let's tell a story because that's all they care about. Right. Let's tell a story, and if the story is that good, then not only they'll buy it. I don't have to have a CFO. I don't have to have boards of directors. I don't have anything. So he completely understood the power of story, but it isn't that everything about him was fraudulent. That's false, unless unless he's deluding himself. But he lived, ate, and breathed this EA stuff. We can talk about whether the EA stuff is nuts or whether it makes sense. It's got a nutty component to it, but it meant a lot to him, and it's where he got his sense of identity.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. No, but it is interesting what you wrote. You said selling a new business to a VC was less like selling a sofa than it was like pitching a movie idea. And they basically it was how excited you can make them about the story. And in 4 rounds of fundraising, he sold 6% of FTX for $2.3 billion, 150 different firms invested. They all caved to his refusal to give them a seat on the board. He had no board. They had no control over the business. I mean, it's just wild. And then you list so many celebrities throughout the whole piece. Anna Wintour and the conversation that you wrote about where he's playing a video game while she's basically hoping that he'll fund the Met Gala and potentially fundraise for Buttigieg. And the Kardashians, sports team owners, Hillary Clinton, the CEO of Goldman Sachs. Of course, he paid Tom Brady and Giselle so much, Kevin O'Leary. I mean, it's sad. It kind of makes me feel icky about a lot of things, and that a lot of people seem to have a price tag.
So a lot of people have a price tag. I also think in some cases it was just their price tag, and in some cases they actually fell in love with Sam. You can't understand the story unless you understand that people actually were charmed by him. That they actually, or put it another way. I'll put it the way that like Dan Friedberg, his lawyer, put it. Almost in tears after it all falls apart. He said, I wanted there to be a Sam. He wanted there to be this person who wanted to take on these big problems that governments weren't taking on, who was there for reasons different than most people who make lots of money are there for. And I think a lot of people wanted there to be a Sam, and for different reasons. So Democratic politicians, they really wanted there to be a Sam, right? You have someone who's going to give away billions of dollars basically 4 years on your side.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he may be giving some of that to Republicans who are less Trumpy than it's not all going to Democrats, but it's basically all going to their cause. Um, uh, the Bahamas. The
Mm.
Bahamas really wanted there to be an honest crypto exchange. They really wanted Sam Bankman-Fried to be the face of Bahamas crypto, that they could advertise that they created a home for these kind of companies, and the person who walked in was the person of the highest integrity. The regulators had been, they've had a very fractious relationship with most people in crypto. Most people in crypto lift a middle, especially exchange people, have been lifting a middle finger to the SEC and the CFTC from the beginning. And that Sam was willing to not do that and come and have meetings and explain what he wanted to do and kowtow to them and give jobs to former regulators, all that stuff. They wanted there to be a Sam. So he filled some need some hole that wouldn't exist in a properly functioning society, right? That a lot of the need he was filling was in response to things that are kind of broken. People in financial regulatory reform, people who were upset that the stock market's got this weird rigging to it that enable high frequency traders to run circles around everybody else, and have watched in frustration as SEC chairman after SEC chairman has said they're going to fix it, and then they don't fix it. They wanted there to be a Sam who came in with a different kind of exchange structure that just fixed the problem. It's a long list of reasons why people wanted him, and he was feeding into that. And I think, when I wrote the book, I did think I've not done my job if after the first 3 or 4 chapters, the reader doesn't at least have the possibility of being charmed by him and liking him or being interested in him, because this is what happened in the real world. Like if he was just a jerk, if people just hated him, if he was clearly like an egomaniac that was out of control, he wouldn't have had anything like the influence he had. I'll tell you a funny anecdote. Did you go to Crypto Bahamas by any chance?
No.
Did you go to? Okay. So he has this shindig last April, and it's like 5,000 people or 8,000 people in the Bahamas. It's called Crypto Bahamas. It's a celebration of everything FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, and all kinds of people came. I met the mayor of Miami there because he came just to kiss Sam's ring. And at Crypto Bahamas was one of the characters from The Big Short. You remember The Big Short?
Yes.
I wrote the book. So a character in The Big Short is there. He is, because he's one of the people who shorted the subprime mortgage market, who ran circles around Wall Street because he was cynical about Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
This is a person who is totally cynical about human nature. And I said, I won't tell you his name, but I said to him, like, why are you here? And he says, I just like Sam. Huh. And I said, why do you like Sam? He says, how many people have you met who are worth $20 billion and who aren't a jerk and have nothing to hide, is what he said. This is a person who has made his fortune rooting out other people's secrets. And he likes Sam because he has nothing to hide. So it's real. You can't appreciate the experience unless you appreciate and what happened. That lots of people felt that way about him, and it wasn't because he had some magnificent ability to just trick people that he'd had his whole life. He didn't trick anybody up to the age of 20. It was just a combination of traits that was weird in a person, and his oddness just kind of like charmed people.
Well, I know that through your writing, I mean, you've before focused on sort of the misfit toys. I think people have even said that about the characters in your books. Can I share with you my favorite character in Going Infinite?
Yes.
Caroline was my You want to know why, Michael? Because I'm a millennial woman, and that girl she just got her heart broken over and over again. She was putting herself out there and just wanted to be loved back and accepted for who she is. And no one would give her the love that she so craved. And I really think that my belief is that she's the one that leaked the balance sheet ultimately, with the connection between her ex-boyfriend, the person who wrote for Forbes. I'm like, okay, Caroline blew this whole thing up and walked away.
I think that's entirely possible. And I'll tell you something. It's funny hearing you say what you just said, because I handed the book. I write my books in installments, basically. I hand the book not as a whole book to the publisher, but I hand 2 chapters at a time. And it was read by like 15 people in the British and the American publishing house at the same time. And up to the moment that Caroline walks onto the scene and proceeds to be basically emotionally abused by Sam, up to that moment, everybody was like, we love the main character. They were just like this is so, he's so interesting. I want to go on a ride with it. Whatever bad things he did, I want to go on this ride. When Carolyn, when the love memos start to appear in the book,
oh yeah, juicy.
there is a huge split. The men are all kind of like, I still like Sam, and the women are all, I cannot stand Sam.
Well, yeah,
it was, and the women all, like to a woman, loved Caroline, and I did not see. I'm a guy. I did not see that coming. I
had our hearts broken and had the guy who rejected us, So.
Well, but and it's so painful in the story. It's so you feel her pain, but I still did not see it coming. I was just shocked by several women in the publishing house saying Caroline is my heroine, and I thought, why?
Well, I wouldn't go there, but
no, I wouldn't go there either.
Before we start to wrap up, because I know you're short on time, but I just want to point out for people that do have the book, you kind of have to look for it, but there was no real organizational chart. So you essentially made one. And this was sort of what you put together of how FTX
It's better than that. It's in the inside of Jacket Flap. And this is the corporate psychiatrists organization.
Oh, that's chart. Right.
George Lerner, who is so frustrated by the fact Sam refuses to have any kind of organization. In therapy, he quizzes 100 FTX employees until he teases out that organization chart. And it was so funny. He gave it to me before he left the scene. And he said, nobody knows this exists because Sam would be furious if he knew I did this. And he says, I'm going to give it to you so you can use it, but don't tell anybody, it exists. And the bankruptcy people instantly were saying things like, they did say, we don't know where to begin. There's not even an organization chart. And it was so funny to think that the thing existed and it was just in the psychiatrist's head. And it's accurate. It's accurate. It's actually quite good. And I thought the reader, because there's so many characters, it's a bit like a Tolstoy novel. You get the family tree in the front, or a Shakespeare play where you get all the kings.
Helpful for Game of Thrones as well.
It's very helpful for Game of Thrones. You want to just put it on the wall, and so when someone walks on stage, you can kind of see where they belong.
Yeah, no. Okay. Well, before we finish, I do want to come back on the subject of Bitcoin, because I do focus a lot of my show on that. A lot of the people who watch, and I'm one of them, I do believe the system needs to be changed, and there needs to be something that just brings about a chance for people to retain the value of what they work so hard to earn. Yep. And we live in a digital world, so maybe we need a digital gold instead of a rock that sits in a vault. And so I'm just kind of curious, with your experience, I'm sure you've been getting a lot more information and throughout the process of writing this. What is your take on Bitcoin? Is it something that you would invest in? Are you curious about it? Where do you think it's going? I mean, I think these spot Bitcoin ETFs will be approved soon, leading to more institutional adoption. And anytime these lawsuits came out, whether it was FTX, Binance, Kraken, whatever it may be, Bitcoin was never one of the tokens that the regulators had an issue with.
I've learned to respect the faith that people have in Bitcoin. So I start there. Like, I wouldn't short Bitcoin. I think that would be a really stupid thing to do. I don't own Bitcoin, though. The blockchain technology is clearly really interesting and will clearly one day be something the financial system runs on. It may be 30 years. I don't know how long it's going to take. The problems I've had with Bitcoin, just like as a writer, people come to me and say, you got to write about Bitcoin. I go back to 2011 or 10 or whenever it was. And what Bitcoin enthusiasts are selling me on at the time is this is going to replace fiat currency. Like, you're going to spend this. And it clearly was not up to the task at the time. It's not quite. I mean, you can do it, but it's just not convenient. It feels to me like it has felt to me for a long time like a technology is still trying to figure out what its place is in the world, like what it's actually going to be used for, as opposed to dissident money. Dissident money has a big place in the world. So I'm curious and wait and see is sort of how I feel about it. I think it's dumb to be cynical about it. And you're really dumb to bet against it.
Okay.
But beyond that, I'm wait and see.
Well, Michael, I read The Big Short, saw the movie, and it really spoke to me because my family was one of the 10 million or so American families who lost their home during the great financial crisis. My parents went belly up. They lost what was their American dream and had to start over. So it was very personal for me to read that. And I think it planted a seed for me where I was like, what is wrong with this system? This is America, right? We stand for opportunity and freedom and working hard to achieve your dreams. And yet it feels like the American dream has been declining. So from all your experience writing multiple books and working on Wall Street and seeing what's happened with central banks and all this policy and our crazy amount of debt, I mean, what do you think is the fix to the broken money that we have?
Do I get to be God? Because when you start talking about fixes, the first thing that pops up is like, how practical can you even get this done? I mean, I wrote a lot way back when Mitch McConnell was working very hard to get as much money into politics as possible to try to prevent that from happening. I thought that is going to be very, very bad for the society. Mm-hmm. It's corrosive in so many ways, especially in a society where financial inequality is just growing.
Totally.
It creates even greater opportunity for a handful of people to have more influence than they should. If I could fix that, I might start with that. I might start with that. The problem, so moving on to Wall Street, it's really not a properly regulated industry anymore. The regulators have been captured when there's such a gap between what you make on Wall Street and what you make as a regulator. And when it has become a cultural norm that you go to the SEC in order to get one of those fancy, I mean, it's just, that used to be scandalous. There was a time when you just couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. It means the regulator is just a joke. The regulator is doing kind of doing their best to seem like they're doing their job without actually offending the industry. Mm-hmm. And that's what's been happening. So number two is to create more independence in the regulatory authority and insistence that if you go there, like there are rules about where you can go afterwards. But I think until you do one, you can't do two. That because, the senator from, there's a senator from this high frequency trading firm and a senator from that high frequency trading firm, you're not going to be able, and those firms don't want you to be, they don't want a regulator with teeth. That the legislative bodies won't allow the regulator to become strong. So I would start with the money. I'd start with the money in politics and work from there.
Yeah, I think there's too much money in politics, and also the corporations have really captured a lot of control with regards to what the government does. That's
depends on the industry, but that's all. It's always been true. It's particularly true with the financial sector. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, I don't want to end on a depressing note. No. I do think the thing about our society that I love is its capacity for reinvention. That we are not like other countries. We really aren't. We do crazy shit, and we do embarrassing stuff, and people look at us and think they've run off the rails. But we come around remarkably well sometimes. And when you step outside of the political space into the civic space, when you just go to like corporate conferences, it's amazing how wealthy, robust, like strong to me the society still feels, even though it's not at its best right now. I would, again, I wouldn't bet against the faith in Bitcoin. I think it would be really dumb to bet against this country. I think that just things can happen.
I really do. I feel the same way. And I think that we appear more divided than we actually are. I think most people want the same things. They want to take care of their families and connect with others and have a roof over their head and to be able to retire with dignity. I actually think we have a lot in common. So to end on more of a positive note, obviously this book is sold. It's going to be a movie, right? So what's next for you? Because I know, like I said before, you attended the trial after the book was published. So what's next for you, for Sam in jail, and who do you think will play him in the movie?
So that's out of my hands. If I could have anybody, it would be Jonah Hill, but 10 years younger than he is. 10 years ago, Jonah Hill would have been perfect. He might be a bit old now. I don't know. Maybe they can make him look 19. But I have incredible respect for Jonah Hill as an actor. I watched what he did with Moneyball, and
Moneyball was amazing. Yeah,
he can do anything. He can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And what's next for me? I'm actually probably going. I promised Apple a television show, and there's no point in telling you what it's about because it would just take too long. But it's a drama. And I've written the first script, and if that goes, that's probably what I'll do.
Wow.
But there's a little part of me that can't quite let go of Sam Bankman-Fried. That the premise of my going into my relationship with him was, I don't know what the story is. It's just wherever you go, it gets pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I think jail is about to get interesting. He creates story wherever he goes, and I mean, he's already look. Before the book came out, you mentioned the 60 Minutes episode on the book. No one had seen the book. The 60 Minutes episode comes out on a Sunday. And I instantly hear from his lawyer that Sam has watched the episode in jail with his cellmates, who are the former president of Honduras and the former attorney general of Mexico, and his prison guards who wanted to see the thing. After which the prison guards started asking for crypto trading advice. Now, this is not a normal prison situation. Already you got the beginning of a sitcom. And
oh my God,
there may be a story in there. It's just weird stuff happens wherever he goes. And I don't think that's going to stop. So I just think I'd be remiss as a writer if I didn't continue to pay some attention to him, because things are likely to happen around him. And I don't know what those things are. But I don't want to miss it if it happens.
For sure. Well, it was fascinating to read your book. Thank you so much. I hope everyone goes out and gets it. I will, of course, link it in the show notes. Michael, thank you so much for your time and the work that you do. You've influenced so many people, and I know a lot of people are inspired to become writers because of your work. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you so much for checking out the video version of my show. Remember, this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing constitutes as official investment advice, and you should always do your own research. Please reach out if you have guest suggestions or any feedback. My email is natalie@talkingbitcoin.com, and I'll see you next time.